Most people believe they have an emotional problem. They say things like, "I'm too emotional. I get angry too fast. That's just how my character is." And for years, they carry that belief quietly. They blame themselves for reactions that feel automatic. They feel guilty for emotions that arrive uninvited. They try to control something that seems uncontrollable, but here's the truth: almost no one tells you this is not a character issue. It's not a weakness. It's not immaturity. It's not a lack of discipline. It's an untrained system. And there's a critical difference between who you are and what has been conditioned inside you. If emotional reactions were a personality flaw, they wouldn't repeat with such precision. The same trigger, the same internal surge, the same regret afterward, again and again and again. That's not character, that's a system doing exactly what it was trained to do. Here's where most advice fails you. It tells you to calm down, to control yourself, to think before you react. But none of that works consistently because your reactions don't begin in your thoughts. They begin before thought arrives. They begin in the nervous system, and this is where Kaizen enters, quietly, precisely, without drama. Kaizen doesn't promise instant calm. It doesn't demand emotional suppression. It doesn't tell you to become someone you're not. Kaizen makes a much smaller promise. It slows the next reaction by 1%. That's it. No big transformation, no emotional shutdown, no forced positivity, just a slightly slower response. And that small delay changes everything. Because control doesn't come from stopping emotions. It comes from creating space before they turn into behavior. Most people never learn this. They try to silence emotions instead of retraining the system that produces them. So let me ask you something, and don't answer it out loud yet. What if emotional control wasn't about suppression, but about timing? What if the goal wasn't to feel less, but to react later? And what if no one ever taught you this because most people don't even know it exists? Stay with me, because once you understand how reactions are formed, you'll stop fighting yourself, and you'll finally know where real emotional control actually begins. Think about the last time you reacted in a way you later regretted. Not the situation itself, but the sequence. Something happened. Something inside you surged. And before you could slow it down, you responded. Now here's the uncomfortable part. If you look closely, that reaction wasn't unique. It was familiar. The same trigger. The same internal feeling. The same behavior. Almost as if it followed a script. That's because it did. Every emotional reaction follows a chain. A trigger appears. An emotion activates. A behavior follows. Trigger, emotion, behavior. And the most important thing to understand is this: once this chain repeats often enough, it stops being a choice. It becomes automatic. This is where people misunderstand themselves. Like they say, "I chose to react that way." But in reality, the choice was made long before awareness arrived. The brain loves efficiency. It is constantly looking for the shortest path between stimulus and response. The less energy it has to spend, the better. So when a reaction works, even if it's destructive, the brain remembers it. Not because it's healthy, but because it's familiar. That's why the same patterns repeat for years. Criticism turns into defense. A message turns into an instant reply. A sense of unfairness turns into anger. Not because you want it to, but because your nervous system has learned this is the fastest way through. Over time, the shortcut becomes dominant. And here's the key insight most people never hear. Your nervous system doesn't choose what's best for you. It chooses what it knows best. Familiarity feels safe to the system, even when it hurts you. This is why willpower fails. You're trying to fight a shortcut with conscious effort, and conscious effort is slow. The shortcut wins every time. This is where Kaizen matters deeply. Kaizen doesn't try to erase the reaction. It doesn't ask you to suddenly behave differently. Instead, it works at the level where shortcuts are formed. The nervous system always selects the most repeated path. Kaizen slowly introduces a new one, not by force, by repetition. A slightly different response, a slightly delayed action, a moment where nothing happens. At first, it feels insignificant, but to the nervous system, it's a new experience, and repeated experiences reshape preference. This is why Kaizen works where motivation collapses. You are not trying to override the system, you are training it. And training always begins with awareness, not judgment, not suppression, just recognition. The moment you can see the chain, trigger, emotion, behavior, you are no longer completely inside it, you are standing just outside it. And that distance, even if it's small, is where change becomes possible. But there's still a deeper layer beneath this, because to change reactions, you need to understand where emotions actually originate. And it's not where most people think. In the next part, we'll go beneath behavior, beneath thought, and straight into the nervous system itself. That's where reactions are born. And that's where Kaizen does its most powerful work. Most people believe emotions begin in the mind. They think a thought appears, then a feeling follows, and then they react. That belief feels logical, but it's wrong. Emotional reactions don't start with thinking. They start with detection. Your brain is constantly scanning for threat, not danger in the dramatic sense, but anything that feels unpredictable, unfair, or destabilizing. A tone of voice, a look, a message that feels dismissive, a situation that resembles a past wound. When the brain detects a possible threat, it doesn't ask for permission. It sends a signal. That signal goes straight to the nervous system, and the nervous system doesn't negotiate. It activates an alarm. Heart rate changes, muscles tighten, breathing shifts, attention narrows. This all happens before a single conscious thought finishes forming. By the time you notice that you're angry, anxious, or defensive, your body is already preparing to act. This is the moment most people misunderstand themselves. They say, "I couldn't control it." But the truth is more precise. Control was never the first step. The system had already moved. Your rational mind always arrives late to emotional reactions, not because you're weak, but because that's how the human nervous system evolved. Thinking is slow. Survival responses are fast, and this creates a dangerous illusion. You believe you are reacting because you decided to. In reality, you are often reacting because your nervous system already decided for you. This is why logic fails during emotional moments. This is why promises like, "Next time I'll stay calm," collapse under pressure. You're trying to override an alarm after it has already been triggered. Kaizen approaches this from a completely different angle. It doesn't try to control behavior after the alarm goes off. It doesn't tell you to suppress emotion. It focuses on the alarm threshold itself. Kaizen trains the nervous system to react less intensely to the same stimuli over time, not by force, by exposure, by repetition, by small, safe experiences that teach the system that not every trigger is a threat. This is a crucial shift in understanding. You don't need to control emotions. You need to train the sensitivity of the system that produces them. Kaizen doesn't say, "Don't react." It says, let's slowly raise the threshold that triggers the alarm. When the threshold changes, everything else follows. The emotion still appears, but it arrives softer. The urge to react still exists, but it's less urgent. And in that reduced urgency, something new becomes available. Choice, not forced choice, not willpower-based choice, natural choice. This is where emotional control actually lives, not in suppression, not in discipline, but in a nervous system that no longer perceives everything as an emergency. And once you understand this, you stop blaming yourself for reactions you never consciously chose. Instead, you begin working with the system that created them. But here's the next problem. Most people are told to calm down, as if the nervous system understands commands. It doesn't, and that's exactly why the next part matters. Because once you see why traditional advice fails, you'll understand why Kaizen succeeds, where everything else collapses. At some point, everyone hears the same advice. Word, calm down, relax, control yourself. Sometimes it comes from others, sometimes it comes from your own inner voice, and every time it fails. Not because you're incapable, not because you didn't try hard enough, but because the nervous system does not learn through commands. It learns through experience. Most people attempt emotional control using 3 common strategies. The first is suppression. They feel the emotion rise, anger, anxiety, frustration, and they push it down. They force themselves to stay silent. They pretend it isn't there. But suppression doesn't remove emotion. It traps it, and trapped emotion doesn't disappear. It builds pressure. Eventually, it explodes, often stronger than before. The second strategy is self-blame. I shouldn't feel this way. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just be normal? This creates a second layer of threat. Now the nervous system isn't just reacting to the original trigger, it's reacting to judgment. Pressure increases, safety decreases, the system tightens even more. The third strategy is the promise. Next time, I won't react. I swear I'll stay calm. These promises feel empowering in the moment, but they rely on a dangerous assumption that when the trigger appears, your rational mind will be in control. It won't be, because when the alarm activates, thinking steps aside. This is the core mistake. Trying to control a system that is already in emergency mode is like shouting instructions at a fire alarm. It doesn't listen. Pressure feels like threat to the nervous system, and threat produces stronger reactions, not weaker ones. This is why force backfires. This is why discipline collapses under stress, and this is why telling yourself to calm down often makes everything worse. Kaizen takes a completely different approach. It does not issue commands, it creates conditions. Kaizen understands something subtle but powerful. The nervous system only relaxes when it repeatedly experiences safety. Not safety as an idea, safety as a lived experience. So instead of demanding calm, Kaizen introduces small, controlled moments where the system can learn something new. Moments where nothing bad happens even though the trigger was present. Moments where reaction is delayed without consequence. These experiences are quiet. They don't feel dramatic. They don't feel like progress. But to the nervous system, they are everything. Because every time you experience a trigger without escalating into reaction, the alarm threshold shifts. Slightly. Kaizen doesn't fight the nervous system, it teaches it, slowly, gently, without threat. And that's why it works where force fails. But now comes the most important question. If commands don't work, and suppression backfires, what does actually retrain the system? That answer lies in Kaizen's core mechanism, and once you understand it, emotional control stops being mysterious. It becomes trainable. Up to this point, one question should be forming in your mind. If force doesn't work, if suppression backfires, and if commands only increase pressure, then what actually changes the nervous system? The answer is simpler than most people expect, and that simplicity is exactly why it works. Kaizen does not aim for calm. It does not aim for emotional mastery. It does not aim for a new personality. Kaizen works on a much quieter level. It changes what the nervous system considers normal. The nervous system doesn't update itself through insight. It updates itself through repetition. But not just any repetition. Safe repetition. This is the core principle Kaizen is built on. A nervous system is rewritten through repeated experiences that carry no threat. Not through effort, not through intensity, not through dramatic breakthroughs, through small, low-risk exposures that slowly recalibrate expectation. Most people think change requires intensity. Kaizen understands that intensity feels like danger to the nervous system, and danger reinforces the very reactions you're trying to escape. So Kaizen removes intensity from the equation entirely. There is no goal to stay calm. There is no demand to handle emotions better. There is only one task. Repeat a slightly different response in a situation that used to trigger you, without forcing anything. That's it. The change does not happen because the response is perfect. It happens because the system experiences something new. A trigger appears, but the reaction is delayed, even briefly. Nothing bad happens. That experience gets logged, and the nervous system learns something subtle but critical. This situation was not as dangerous as expected. The next time, the alarm rises a little less, not dramatically, almost imperceptibly. But that reduction matters because nervous systems don't shift in leaps. They shift in increments. This is why Kaizen avoids big promises. Big promises create pressure. Pressure feels like threat. Threat reinforces the alarm. Kaizen stays small on purpose, small enough that the system doesn't resist, small enough that failure doesn't feel dangerous, small enough that repetition becomes possible. And repetition is everything. Each low-risk repetition slightly reshapes the alarm threshold, not through logic, not through motivation, through lived experience. This is the golden principle of Kaizen applied to emotional regulation. A nervous system is rewritten by repeated experiences of safety, not by suppressing emotion, not by overpowering reaction, by showing the system again and again that it doesn't need to escalate. And here's the most important shift this creates. You stop trying to control emotions. You stop fighting reactions. Instead, you begin cooperating with the system. You give it new data. And new data changes behavior naturally. At this stage, something interesting starts to happen. You notice the reaction sooner. You feel the urge, but it doesn't immediately turn into action. There's a pause, not forced, not manufactured, just there. That pause is not willpower, it's training. And once a pause exists, choice becomes possible. But how do you actually create that pause without turning it into another form of control? That's where Kaizen becomes practical. In the next part, we'll break down the exact mechanism that creates space between emotion and behavior, step by step, without suppression. This is where awareness turns into a usable skill. At this point, one thing should be clear. Emotional control does not begin with stopping emotions. It begins with noticing the moment before behavior takes over. This is where Kaizen becomes practical, not abstract, not philosophical, usable. The micropause system is not about calming yourself down. It's about creating just enough space for the nervous system to learn something new. And it works in 3 simple stages, not because they are clever, but because they are small enough to repeat without resistance. The first stage is awareness, not mental awareness, physical awareness. Before every reaction, the body speaks. There is a tightening in the chest, a clenching in the jaw, a subtle lift in the shoulders. These sensations appear before words, before thoughts, before behavior. Most people ignore them because they're focused on the situation outside. Kaizen reverses that focus. You don't analyze the trigger, you notice the signal, that's all. No interpretation, no judgment, just recognition. The second stage is delay. This is the heart of the system, not a dramatic pause, not deep breathing, not counting to 10, just one breath. You delay the reaction by a single inhale and exhale. You don't decide what to do next, you don't plan a better response, you simply don't act yet. You stay in the body. That single breath does something critical. It interrupts the automatic chain without creating pressure. To the nervous system, this delay feels safe. Nothing is being forced, nothing is being suppressed. The third stage is observation. This is where most people make a mistake. They think they need to stop the reaction. You don't. You watch it. You allow the urge to be there without immediately turning it into action. The desire to speak, to defend, to explain, to push back. You don't fight it, you don't obey it, you witness it, and something subtle begins to change. The nervous system experiences a new outcome. A trigger appeared, the urge arose, but the reaction did not immediately follow, and nothing bad happened. This is not meditation, there is no goal of calm. This is reflex rewriting. Every time you complete this sequence, notice, delay, observe, the system updates its expectation, not consciously, biologically. At first, the changes are barely noticeable. You still feel the emotion, you still feel the urge, but the urgency softens, the reaction slows. And that slowing is everything, because once reaction speed decreases, choice quietly enters the space. Not as effort, not as control, as availability. This is how Kaizen works at the deepest level. It doesn't demand a better response. It creates conditions where a better response becomes possible on its own. But this raises an important question. If these pauses are so small, if the changes are so subtle, when do you actually start noticing real difference? That answer lies in time, and understanding how change unfolds is what prevents people from quitting too early. In the next part, we'll walk through exactly what changes, week by week, month by month, when Kaizen is applied consistently. This is where patience turns into proof, and where most people finally realize why they no longer feel controlled by their emotions. At this stage, a natural question arises. If I do this, what will actually change? And more importantly, when? Because most people don't quit emotional work because it doesn't work. They quit because they don't recognize progress when it arrives quietly. Kaizen prepares you for this, not by promising speed, but by explaining the timeline honestly. In the first week, almost nothing feels different on the surface. The emotions still appear, the triggers still exist, the reactions still happen. And this is where many people think they're failing. They're not. Something important is already changing. Awareness increases. You begin noticing the reaction earlier, not before it starts, but closer to its beginning. You catch the tightening in the chest, the tension in the jaw, the surge of urgency. This may feel frustrating at first, because seeing something without stopping it can feel pointless. But awareness is not the result, it's the foundation. In weeks 2 and 3, a subtle shift begins. The reaction doesn't disappear, but it slows. There is a slightly longer gap between the emotion and the behavior. You don't always use it, you don't always choose differently, but the space is there, and something else changes too. Regret begins to fade, not because reactions stop, but because you feel less hijacked by them. You recognize what happened without turning it into self-judgment. This matters more than it sounds, because shame is one of the strongest triggers for repeated reactions. When shame decreases, the system relaxes. By the 1 to 2 month mark, deeper changes appear. Some triggers lose intensity. Situations that once felt urgent now feel manageable. The nervous system begins to produce fewer alarms for the same inputs. Not because you forced it, because it learned. This is the moment many people describe as strange. They say things like, "I still feel things, but they don't carry me away anymore." This is not emotional numbness, it's emotional proportion. The response matches the situation instead of overwhelming it. Over the long term, something fundamental shifts. You stop trying to be calm. You stop managing emotions. The system simply operates with less urgency. Reactions become optional instead of automatic. And this is the most important realization of all. Kaizen does not remove emotion. It removes the constant emergency. You don't become someone who never feels. You become someone who is no longer rushed by feeling. And once urgency disappears, clarity takes its place. This is why Kaizen changes identity without forcing transformation. You don't wake up one day feeling different. You wake up one day realizing you didn't overreact. And you didn't even try not to. That's when you know the system has changed. But to make this shift permanent, there is one final piece to understand. It's not about technique, it's not about practice, it's about how you relate to this process itself. And that's where everything comes together. If there's one misunderstanding about emotional control, it's this. People think becoming emotionally strong means becoming emotionally numb. It doesn't. Kaizen doesn't take your emotions away. It gives you stability beneath them. You still feel, you still care, you still respond to life, but emotions no longer drag you forward faster than you can stand. They no longer decide for you before you even arrive. This is the quiet power Kaizen builds. Not dominance, not suppression, grounded strength. Your emotions still come, but they no longer carry you away. And that changes how you move through the world. You speak without rushing. You listen without tightening. You respond without losing yourself, not because you're trying harder, because the system inside you is no longer stuck in emergency mode. This is the real promise of Kaizen, not transformation overnight, not emotional perfection, but a nervous system that works with you, not against you. So before this video ends, I want you to pause for a moment, not to analyze, not to plan, just to notice. What is one reaction in your life right now that you could slow down by just 1%? Not stop, not fix, just slow. Hold that question, because that's where change actually begins. And if this way of thinking resonates with you, that if you're done chasing dramatic breakthroughs and ready to build something that lasts, Kaizen Mind Mastery is built for you. This channel isn't about big transformations.